Welcome to Strata, where the built world meets what's next. Our planet is undergoing a profound reordering, driven by the unprecedented impacts of climate change, breakthroughs in science and technology, and sweeping socio-geographic shifts. The convergence of these structural changes is fundamentally reshaping the places and spaces in which we live, work, and play. We call this the built environment transition.
We're in a kind of an interesting industry that hasn't changed for decades or maybe generations by some measures. But on the other hand, it's always evolving because the people who use space are evolving.
Please welcome Steve Weikal.
Good morning and welcome. Delighted to have everybody here today for this conversation. The first thing I noticed was that as soon as the announcement was made, everybody got quiet and found their seats. That never happens in my class. So anyway, I appreciate that. We have this great program scheduled today. Delighted to be here with that. The Center for Real Estate is a research group within the School of Architecture and Planning. I'm with a group called the Real Estate Transformation Lab. And in that group, we try to understand the impact of technology on the built environment and the process of innovation and invention and discovery that comes from the lab and ultimately ends up out in the industry that we all work in. And so we're able to hopefully understand some of the trends that are happening. We try to identify these mega trends that are happening. You heard a few of them in the intro video. And we think there is this profound reordering that's happening now, that's going to happen. My colleague, Professor Dennis Frenchman, refers to it as an epic reordering. So is that an exaggeration? I'm not so sure. We'll find out today. But certainly driven by some major trends, climate, energy, infrastructure around that, also just science and technology. Lots of headlines about AI, the new versions of AI that are starting to impact the industry, materials science, a number of the things that we do here at MIT, and then socio-geographic shifts, kind of the human part. And as we know, real estate isn't always about the physical hard structure. Sometimes it's about, or is often about, how the humans engage with the physical space. And we'll be exploring all of these and how these trends are going to reshape the places and the spaces that we live and we work and we play. And as I mentioned, we call this the built environment transition as a big trend that's happening. And I thought I'd share a little bit about this idea of profound and epic. Let me put some numbers on it.
Just to start, $275 trillion. This is the estimate to retrofit the global economy, the global energy and land use infrastructure through 2050. Huge number, 275 trillion. How about 2.6 trillion from 2020 to 2060? The world is expected to add about 2.6 trillion square feet of real estate. 18% of the global workforce could be automated. Now that's not just AI, but some kind of automation, level of automation, impacting 300 million jobs globally. And the last number, 1.1 trillion, 30% of US office buildings valued at 1.1 trillion could become obsolete due to changing work patterns. And the sources here, McKinsey, the United Nations, Bloomberg, and Goldman Sachs, all exploring this with some concern, but also a tremendous opportunity. And we will explore that today as well. But I think what we can all agree on is that this is going to require a total rethinking of the what and the why and the where and the how of real estate. It could be around resilience, it could be around adaptation, it could be around performance of the buildings. A lot of topics to unpack in this conversation, in this built environment transition. So we'll take a look at where. Where will the necessary invention and discovery take place? Because we think that the existing structures are probably not going to be able to, will not enable this massive transformation that's going to take place. So we're going to have to innovate. We're going to have to explore different ways of doing things. And so we first could look at the where. And of course, for real estate people, that's important. Where will the necessary discovery take place? Right now, you're sitting in Kendall Square, right in the center of Kendall Square. This is an image of Kendall Square. The lower part is MIT. The upper part is off campus. You'll notice that there isn't really a clearly defined line. There's a lot of integration between the Institute and Kendall Square, and some of the most valuable real estate on the planet, life sciences mostly. But I always like to remind people that 55 years ago, it looked like this. Pretty remarkable. Not much there. Draper Labs was there. The head house for the T was there, for the subway. MIT is over here on the right. So it just shows that in 50 years, what has happened as a result of some of the things that happen on campus that have generated a whole economy around Kendall Square and Cambridge. In fact, today we have over 250 life sciences firms. We have over 150 tech companies. We have over 800 startups. That's probably higher, actually. VCs are here, co-working spaces, a whole bunch of familiar names and not so familiar names. But this entire ecosystem has risen in 50 years' time. Now, the Real Estate Innovation Lab actually mapped where innovation was happening in the 21st century, taking a look at a few variables like innovation districts, co-working spaces, accelerators, and patent licenses to really understand where's the innovation happening around the world. And you can see it's still clustered in North America, it's clustered in Europe, but these other emerging areas in other parts of the world are going to start generating this innovation and discovery to help us transform cities. And also another interesting statistic, which I'm sure you've seen, there are currently 33 megacities on Earth, with another 6 on the way by 2030. And those are just the megacities. There are the mega regions, there are the kind of junior megacities. This is a staggering amount of, I go back to the number I gave you earlier, the amount of square footage that's going to be added in the world. How are we going to do it? How are we going to build it? Where are the materials going to come from? How are we going to finance it? Really some big questions for some very big projects. While we're on the topic of MIT, I'll really share what does this invention and discovery look like? And we have some MIT examples. Allium Engineering is reinventing rebar and metal coatings, that doesn't sound particularly sexy, but when you look at rebar and how much rebar is used in the world and how it's produced and that it goes into everything and how it sometimes fails, we'll need to rethink every piece of the supply chain and every material that goes into what we build. Sublime Systems reinventing real estate. Transera reinventing HVAC. Breakthroughs from the lab that are now being applied, from MIT now being applied. Boston Metal, green steel. Can we come up with different ways to make steel? We're going to need steel. We're going to need coatings on it from Allium. So those are some examples. Active Surfaces is doing thin film solar. Elise AI, now a double unicorn, using AI on engagement for multifamily, but also on the leasing side, but also on property management, using AI in powerful ways. They were always using AI, but now it's different because of the new breakthroughs in AI. Lamar doing MRI scans of building for energy and structural integrity. Gaia is helping us understand what our timber property looks like. How do we know what's being grown and where it's being grown, and does it satisfy what we need in the industry that's much more robust than looking from the satellite? So these are just some examples of what we've been doing here at MIT to impact the built environment broadly. There's a couple of guys from McKinsey who have been writing about the titanium economy. Anybody heard of this concept, the titanium economy, right? Dominic, of course you have. This is interesting. So I was talking about MIT and the amazing things that we get to do here. But this was an analysis of 4,000 industrial firms that are kind of high-tech, clean, very sophisticated. This is not the old school manufacturing in the United States. And they called it the titanium economy. And they estimate there are about 4,000 industrial firms doing this. They boost GDP by $275 billion and create 1.5 million jobs. Now, if you look on the map, some of the areas are familiar. Chicago's there, New York and Boston are there. But there are other places in the country that are starting to emerge around this particular activity, on this highly sophisticated manufacturing that's going on, the titanium economy. And then Brookings came out with what I thought was a very interesting map, just identifying they defined 6 different types of AI metro areas. Have you seen this one? Just to kind of understand where's all the AI activity going on. And I forget what the 3 metrics were. They were looking at maybe skill level and also maybe academic and scientific work. But I just think it's useful to understand where they think superstars, Bay Area, not surprising. Star hubs, including the entire New England corridor, but Texas, but Atlanta, some in Florida. So for us to understand where this is going to emerge, and as my colleague Dominic Endicott says, who you'll hear from on a panel later, he reminds us that as the AI becomes more ubiquitous and these tools become more ubiquitous and all of the workers are able to do amazing things, placemaking becomes really critical. Where do these people want to be? Where do these workers want to be? And before we were looking at a dispersal of the workforce because of remote work and a variety of tools to allow us to do that. This could really be on steroids. This could be the next version of that. So now placemaking becomes really important because they can live anywhere in the world. Understanding their decision making is especially critical, and that's what you'll hear from Chase and Greg when they have a conversation and about HQO and the work that they're doing. So different AI metro areas. This built environment transition is going to require new models for real estate, new models for cities, and new models for the people who use them. So today, we're going to talk about we're going to come at this in a couple of different directions. One direction is quantum cities, which is a specific strategy for urban strength, recognizing that cities are what power humanity and the world. And then we're going to talk about city retrofits. My first real estate job was in suburban Detroit, and actually was in downtown Detroit. And so what are we going to do with these cities that were from another era? All of these assets that are there, the infrastructure is already there, the history is already there. Can we retrofit them in a way that we can bring them into the 21st, 22nd, 23rd century? And then we'll talk about what are the rules for the new era, which is some parts of the world are developing from scratch, building cities from scratch. We have a little bit of that going on in the United States, also happening in the Middle East, happening elsewhere. What does that look like? And how do we scale that? And how do we deliver on all of those promises? And then we'll talk about, we called it money reimagined. So if we're producing at this scale, if we're doing trillions of square footage, we're producing that, do the old capital systems still work? We don't know. Interesting anecdote, I was speaking with colleagues at a large global reinsurer, and they were telling me, Steve, all this data center activity, the data center developers and the people who are proposing these enormous hyperscale projects, they've come to us to get insurance. The global insurance industry does not have the capacity to insure all of the projects that are being proposed. They can't even insure some of the projects that are coming out of the ground right now. What happens when that same thing happens in capital? When the capital markets cannot support the scale of the development that we're doing. So we're going to explore, are there different ways to generate capital and provide value and be able to build these projects? And then lastly, cities at the speed of change. Let's go out, not quite science fiction, but let's go out and see what are the predictions, what are the visions for what future cities look like really out there. I think if we look at science fiction, my colleague Andrea Chagou used to say, watch the old science fiction movies because they weren't far off. Remember how when we were younger and it was, little flip things where you could communicate to people or talk into your watch? And of course, we have that now. So when we look out at science fiction, sometimes it's not so science fiction. We'll have a conversation about that. And then lastly, we have some special guests and some surprises along the way. So with that, I'll say thank you, welcome. I look forward to seeing all of you and speaking with you, and I'll turn it now over to Greg and Chase. So thank you.